President Biden says during 2020, when Trump was president, he says inflation was what? 9% is what he claims, right? 9%, and he's been able to lower it. And he blasts Americans, claiming Americans have the money to spend, but they're not. And some people are pissed off about that. Is the economy as bad as Americans think? What do you think? Do you think the economy is as bad as it is today? That some people talk about. Federal Reserve Chairman says migration boosts mortgage rates, but at the same time, the president says, Federal Reserve President, rate cuts may not come in 2024. Tom, that's pretty heavy right there for some people. Renters fear they'll never own a home, and Americans are raking up phantom debt in ways they never have before. I want to start off with this Federal Reserve story here. Rate cuts may not come in 2024. Interest rates may remain steady throughout 2024, stating, I would need to see multiple positive inflation readings, suggesting that this inflation process is on track. Kashkari, anticipating a potential shift in labor market dynamics, indicates that a marked decrease in job creation could warrant an interest rate cut. He previously anticipated 2 rate cuts in 2024, but may revise this depending on upcoming data. Despite recent inflation reduction slowing and signs of a possible reacceleration, Kashkari aligns with Fed Chair Jerome Powell in signaling reluctance towards further rate hikes. He emphasizes the need for evidence of declining inflation considering rate cuts, asserting there is a limit when we say, okay, we need to do more.
He has normally been a moderate, level-headed voice. And so to hear him coming out saying, I'm not sure, what he's really saying here is, I'm not sure we were going to go with 1 rate cut because inflation's edging closer to 4% and away from the 2%. So they saw that, and I feel like this is him floating to the markets to let them know, hey, pay attention to your mirrors. Statistics that are out there in CPI are not look like they're getting better, and we need to see the labor market move, so don't automatically think there's going to be cuts. Now, why is he saying this? Because if you absolutely say there's no cuts, the stock market's going to move 2% that day. That's what will happen right now because they're counting
2% if somebody says that.
If they came out today and said, okay, forget about September, because remember, everybody's angling saying, hey, 1 rate cut this year, probably at the mid-September meeting of the Fed. And they're pricing that in. In other words, the markets are looking for that. Because even a small cut in rates on billions and billions and billions of dollars of corporate debt is a lot of EBITDA and a lot of stock value that you get back. And so I think they're trying to soften the blow. We're closer to 4 than we are to 2, which really says that the economy is leveling and struggling to get to the better they want, and it's staying leveled at just okay.
If this guy's saying that and Jerome is saying that, and then you have a story coming out with President Biden, this goes with rate cuts. Biden claims inflation was 9% when he came into office, when it was actually 1.4%. Despite acknowledgement of inflation reality and the impact on consumers' confidence, Biden attributed to the issue to greedy corporations. So he's blaming the corporations, defending his administration's handling of the economy amidst growing criticism and negative poll ratings. Biden's defiance against inflation worries contrast with public sentiment and polling data, with concerns mounting over economic management. So here's where I'm going with this, Tom. When did they change the way they measure inflation? The way they measured inflation was every 2 years, and then they changed it to measuring inflation every 12 months. Here's the thing with that. When they changed it from 24 months to 12 months, what was the reasoning for it? The reasoning for it is some claim that going from 24 to 12 months actually showed the rates were lower. And people would say, if we were shown the 24-month rate, inflation is actually such and such. It was always higher than what they reported. And the U.S. government had a number that were reporting for inflation versus what it actually was. So what is the likelihood, and I know this is a crazy question I'm asking about him, what is the likelihood that Biden is saying 9% because maybe it was 9% on the way they measure that works against Trump, but saying it's lower now on the measurement that works in favor of Biden? I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. So it's kind of like saying, well, in this category, the way these guys calculate on the golf score of these 3 categories, that it's the old way of doing it. Yes, it was 9.1%. But for us, I'm going to measure it on this one that's a little bit more friendly to me. We're only at 3.9%. Do you think that's what Biden did, or do you think he was just delusional lying?
First of all, if I think about the man, I think he was probably mistaken. However, you bring up a great point. It has been the great game of politics to find the number you like, the way you like to measure it, and find somebody, some think tank, some department of the government. Oh, the Treasury Department says this, but the Department of Agriculture said this. How can you be talking about crops if the agriculture number I like, and then, oh, well, the agriculture is going to favor themselves. I'm going with the Treasury Department. There's always been this game on find the number you like and then use that and beat up the other guy. But in this case, I think Biden is just plain mistaken. I think he's absolutely mistaken. Like maybe he looked at his own reports that showed that when we had peak inflation in 2022, it was 9, ladies and gentlemen. When you put the entire basket of goods and the total impact on the American consumer, it was 9. As a matter of fact, some say that it was even worse, but they say, well, we're not including energy, or we are including energy. Again, the parlor game here. In this case, I think Biden was just mistaken because, I mean, this is a guy that's reading teleprompters and getting mistaken the last 2 weeks, and he doesn't do well, just to be objective, not picking on him and not being bombastic. He hasn't done well in sort of analytical type interviews going back and forth. And I think in this case, he's just mistaken.
Let me just give you some numbers. You bring a great point about going back 2 years versus 1 year. Inflation peaked at 9% in June of 2022. Here's the chart right here. So if you go to June of 22, at that point, Biden had been president since what? January 20th, 2021. That's when he took office. So that is a year and 6 months after he took office, it peaked. It hit 5% June of 2021. So 6 months into him taking office, boom, it went up. So the question is, how much lag time from all the money printing that was done under Trump and Biden? So here's what Biden could have done and should have done better, and actually what worked. So we all remember in March of 2020, Trump passed the CARES Act. How much money was it? $2.2 trillion of printing money. Whether that was necessary, whether that was a good decision, whether that was a bad decision, go ahead and argue it. Obviously, Biden wins the election, he comes in, but he decides to do what? Print more money. So where does the inflation culprit lie on? Is it Trump printing the 2.2? And how much money, how much trillions of dollars did Biden print after he got elected? I would argue that he shouldn't have done anything. He printed way too much money. What was the stat? 40% of all the money supply in the history of America was printed since 2020. Inflation, but I will give him credit.
A 30-month period, yep.
I will give Biden credit because inflation peaked in June of 22. A month after that, 2 months after that, August of 2022.
What was that number?
What did Biden pass? The Inflation Reduction Act. So it actually worked. So since he passed it, right then, inflation has come down. Is he guilty of doing the money printing in 2021? Yes. But is he also, I guess, deserves some accolades for the Inflation Reduction Act? The reality is this. Both sides printed a hell of money and took on more debt for the economy. But we'll see what happens with the economy.
If I may, the CARES Act was passed, went into effect on March 27, 2020. Biden had been elected, and it was nearly 60 days later that they were debating whether to change it. And he could, as president, he had executive order power. He had the ability to go back with Congress. It was favorable to him. And he could have, there were things that could have happened later. And they talked about the extension, and they talked about where it went. The election wouldn't happen until November. You know, you have March to November. But one of the first things that he got up and did was extended it and actually printed more. Correct. So you can talk about that, but you can talk about the Inflation Reduction Act. The Inflation Reduction Act, that's a misnomer. That's not what it did. Powell raised rates radically. Yeah. That's what got after inflation. So it wasn't like two presidents that had the two knobs that perfectly controlled everything, Adam. Yes, March 27th, CARES started, but it was barely 1 year old when Biden and them were debating it, and they extended it. So they didn't go back and say, bad Trump, we have to do this. They actually extended it, and then Powell raised rates radically.
Powell deserves the credit, no doubt, when it comes to inflation and interest rates.
I'm not saying Trump was innocent on this. I'm just saying let's make sure
both sides printed money is what I'm trying to say.
We look at all the knobs that were being turned.
Just to be clear, the Inflation Reduction Act didn't have much to do with inflation at all. For what I recall, it had to do with energy and chip production and the CHIPS Act. There was a lot of sort of that was stuffed in.
$783 billion went to energy and climate change. Inflation
is increase of prices, right?
Yeah.
And we know historically that the Affordable Care Act, 30 months after it was in place, resulted in a 20% year one increase in people's health insurance coverage. Remember that?
Yeah.
It did. By the end of the second year, people's health insurance coverage increased 30% in price, right? Obama's Affordable Care Act actually increased the cost of health insurance coverage for American workers getting it from their employers. But watch. Guess what it also did? The Inflation Reduction Act had 3 years of Affordable Care Act subsidies, which were meant to reduce the cost of health insurance that your previous boss, Obama, had increased with the Affordable Care Act. So I guess part of the Inflation Reduction Act did try to correct some inflation that was caused by his boss.
So check this out, folks. Remember how I told you they changed the way they measured inflation? So here's an article, Bureau of Labor Statistics, okay? Commissioner's Corner, look at the date, January 10th, 2023. This is roughly 17 months ago, okay? Every year on February 14, there's a celebration of love. This February, BLS will celebrate an improvement on Consumer Price Index, which we hope you will love. Now watch this. Look at the way they're explaining it. Beginning January 2023 index scheduled for publication on February 14th, Valentine's Day, BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics, plans to update the spending weight in the calculation of the CPI every year instead of every 2 years, spending of every year instead of every 2 years. They changed the calculation of inflation to favor them at this time because it would have been worse being reported on what it really was than what they were saying. So it made the American people calmer, but the real inflation was like 30, 40, 50% higher, give or take. And a part of this was because China's economy slowed down and Biden drained the strategic petroleum reserve. That's all kind of hand in hand together. But anyways, going back to asking the question about him, and he turns around and he says, Americans have the money to spend, they're not spending. This leads to the next story, and this is a question for you guys, if you're listening to this. Is the economy as bad as Americans think? Despite experts asserting the U.S. economy's relative strength, with Colorado State University Stephen Weiler highlighting its complexity, stating, the combination of economic indicators is confusing even for economists. A poll reveals 50% of Americans believing the economy is headed in the wrong direction, with 42% reporting a worsened financial situation in the past year. Folks, 50% are saying we're going the wrong direction, 42% are saying it's worse this year than it was last year. That's pretty scary right there, okay? And this is Newsweek. This ain't Fox News. This is not Breitbart. This is Newsweek talking. John Van Reenen from the London School of Economics links the pessimism to lingering inflation effects post-pandemic, emphasizing prices are coming down, but the increase is still fresh in people's memories. Notably, 59% of respondents in the same poll deemed the economy the most critical issue, signaling the significance in the upcoming election. Economically, while inflation persists, March saw a stronger than expected 3.5% rise, contributing to public unease. However, the labor market remains resilient, with March witnessing 303,000 job increase and unemployment dipping to 3.8%. So the question becomes, Tom, when you hear something like this, is the economy as bad as Americans think? What matters more? Showing data to make an argument and spin to say the economy is better than you guys think, or what the consumer actually feels?
Well, this is interesting. Harris poll, they ran a poll around buy now, pay later, but there were some things that came out as a result of that polling. There was a follow-up question. What's the number one thing to you in the election? Well, I got immigration and the economy. Why do you say economy? Because the economy's bad. Well, why do you say it's bad? Because I can't afford things and I'm pinched. That is what the consumer means. When the consumer says the economy, what they're saying, the polling data show, they're saying my economy, my wallet, my household. That's what they're saying. And the three things that they point to is that there's been a cumulative effect of inflation, but they don't say it that way. They say, I go to the grocery store and I look back 3 years and it's 20% more. That hasn't gone down. Maybe eggs, milk, oil, gas, energy, some commodities have come down, thank goodness. They get some relief, but the overall basket of goods is 20% up since March of 2020 to January 2024. If you ran the common inflation calculators, 20%. Number one. Number two, wage growth is behind inflation. Number three, the labor stats that are touted in the headlines aren't matching what people are feeling, because full-time jobs are going away and more people than ever have second jobs, including cash-only side hustles or 1099 side hustles that are not showing up in job reports. So Americans are saying the economy's bad. They're saying my economy's bad, my wallet.
Whereas, that's what matters, by the way.
That's right. Whereas the mainstream media gets its talking points from the White House. Tell them inflation is coming down. Tell them we blew out the jobs report. Tell them the stock market's up. And by the way, when asked, they all do say, thank goodness my IRA 401k, Pat, the average American gives it credit. The last time I checked, my IRA 401k were okay. So if they have a 401k with work or an IRA with the common indexes and stuff, they've given credit for that, saying, well, thank God the market didn't crash. I saw my retirement balance. But my economy in my household is worse. That's what they mean.
I'll say this. Bidenomics has not helped the American people. Bidenomics was supposed to be a bottom-up, from the middle out economic stimulus package to help the economy. Hasn't really done much. Trump was more of a top-down, trickle-down economics, Reagan-esque type of tax cut. But what's my point? I actually just checked the numbers. We talked about 40% of all money printing was done since 2020. But I actually need to update my stats because it's actually closer to 80%. I think it's close to like almost $19 trillion is circulating in the economy. What's my point? Biden hasn't done to help the American people.
Watch your language.
Whoa.
Okay, guys.
Whoa.
Sorry.
It's a little too much, but
Sorry.
I'm going to clip that and make it my favorite ringtone.
There it is. We're so quick to be binary here and one side good, one side bad.
Yeah.
If he did this, then he's good, he's evil. But the reality is, if you look for the gray, the truth is typically somewhere in the middle. There's a lot of good things you could say about Trump: immigration, the border, anti-wokeness. What I'll tell you straight up is Trump is no fiscal conservative. He printed as much money as any president ever until Biden showed up. He's like, hold my beer, I'm gonna print more. So everything that we're feeling now is not just a Bidenomics thing. Some of the blame must go to Trump. How comfortable are you the fact that Trump printed $2.2 trillion
see, the difference here
in
is
2020?
when you say stuff like that, difference is I don't want to print any money, whether your name is Trump or Biden, until we start paying off some of our money. I'm about firing people that don't need a government job, that should go make it in the free market, which is super hard. The free market is challenging. We have probably 50% of government employees right now that are working for different agencies that we can fire and tell them, go work for a regular job. Not talking military. I'm not talking certain, cops that we need more security for. The last thing we need to do is firing cops. We need to actually ask cops to please keep your job and recruit more cops to keep their jobs. Every time I see a cop that's out there, I used to only do it with military servicemen. Now if I see a cop, I stop and I say, do you realize how important your job is? I want to say thank you to you because your job matters. Thank you for putting your life on the line. I'm grateful for you. They need to hear it as well, not just them. But we can fire 50% of them. We'd figure out a way to make it work. Sometimes when you run in a company, and we've had to make some tough decisions as CEO of multiple companies that I've run, sometimes I need to make a tough decision, and the tough decision sucks. It's never fun when you're making a tough decision. It's just not. And you got to fire somebody. And when you have to fire somebody, that feeling when you fire somebody, in the back of your mind, you as a CEO process it from a few different places. You probably like this person because you've spent some time with them. 2, you're probably care about their career and you want to make sure they have something to do. And then 3, you also know there's going to be backfiring because people are going to talk and defamation and behind closed doors and spinning of the stories. And really as a CEO, you can't tell the whole story. You especially can't, because everyone's watching to see what you do after the way you fire somebody, because they're worried about how you're going to fire them one day and they need to be able to feel protected there, right? Yeah. The point is, the government agencies don't believe they can run without the 50% of the people that they have. I'm convinced they can fire half of the people that are working for these government agencies, and within 3, 6, 12 months, everybody would move on. They'd have to give jobs. They'd be forced to realize the way your attitude is matters, because government employees sometimes don't have the best attitude. The way you treat people matters. The way you service people matters. All that stuff matters. So yeah, I am fully with you on spending money left, right, center, no matter what you are. I want to stop spending money. Let's get our finances in order, okay? When you're running a company and your marketing department or somebody else comes in and says, hey, let's put $3 million into this. Hey, let's put $2 million into this. I said, until you can tell me how we can sell those items, like even a basic thing that we have upstairs, we need $55,000 worth of new computers, and we can sell the other computers for $27,000. Really? Yeah. Place the order the day you get $27,000 of selling those computers.
Right.
Oh, but that could take 6 weeks. I don't give a shit. Right. You sell the computers, you can buy the computers. But you know how the government rolls? Forget about selling it, buy it anyways. And who's paying for that? We're paying for that. That way of spending money, there is no accountability in there, and you're right. I think it's a left, right, center thing.
When you're not the one that's actually paying for it, when Congress is like,
paying for
sure,
it. Yeah.
$1 trillion here,
right.
$1 trillion here,
Yeah.
raise the taxes. There's no accountability.
That's right.
Both sides. This is why they call it the uniparty.
Federal Reserve Chairman says migration boosts mortgage rates.
Yeah.
Let me read this to you. This is an actual, so let's go through this. While the long run effect of increased immigration on inflation is unclear, immigrants nonetheless need a place to live, and their arrival in the U.S. has likely also increased demand for housing. What percentage of illegal immigrants coming here you think are coming here with $300,000 to put a down payment on a house?
Hey, I go to buy a house today.
I want you to think about this, okay? What percentage of illegal immigrants are coming here with $100,000 plus cash?
Less than 1%.
Cash?
Cash.
Well, I mean, unless they're working with the cartels, and the cartels are doing.
What do you think? So I'm actually curious. What is the average net worth of an illegal immigrant that comes across the border?
I'm going to say basically $100 in their pocket, and they had to give the rest to a coyote.
That's what I relate to. We came here with nothing. People who go to Panama go with money. People who go to Dubai with money. People who go to Singapore with money. Illegal immigrants that come to America don't come to America with money, or else that have better choices, okay, better options in their lives. And this guy's saying that they're going to fix and help with the increased demand for housing. From Ohio, I believe. President of Federal Reserve Bank, Minneapolis, said on May 7, in turn, he said mortgage rates are nudged upwards with higher interest rates, saying perhaps a neutral interest rate for the housing market is higher than before the pandemic, which is now raising interest rates to reduce unpopular inflation caused by the federal government's deficit spending.
I think what he's talking about here, if I had to read between the lines here a little bit, I'm not an apologist for him. I don't know this guy. But I think what he's saying is these people are going to need apartments. And so developers are going to need loans to go get the apartments. And right now we've got limited demand. And you would imagine that banks would be decreasing the rate a little bit because there's fewer people looking for a construction loan. You know what I mean, Pat?
Yep.
And if fewer people are looking for a loan, if we don't have a lot of applications on our desk, I'm more likely to give you maybe a quarter point better so I could win the business from Vinny. And if there's 10 of you in here, then I'm not going to lower the rate at all because there's plenty of demand for the money I'm trying to loan. So I would think it would be a little upside down. If you've got limited number of homes being built or limited number of apartments being built, and that's what I'm going to assume here, this is multifamily housing that's being built, then I don't think that's going to keep the rates up. I think that would, if anything, cause a developer to be able to get a little tiny bit better deal. It can't be a screaming good deal because the Fed rate is in there and the spread right now is 1.7. So it's going to be hard for him to get a deal better than about 7%, 7.25% right now.
Who does this affect the most? Socioeconomically poor people are getting screwed by the immigrants. Like the rich people aren't like, oh my God, they're taking my jobs. No, I'm good. We're good. Pat's good. Pat's not losing his job to Hector that just showed up. Or to they're coming from China, or they're coming from Syria, or they're coming from El Salvador, or they're coming from every country around the world, because it's not just South America. We've highlighted that. What happens is this is simply supply and demand. How many illegals or migrants, or as the Biden administration calls them, newcomers, hey y'all, come on in, have come in since the Biden administration? 5 million? 10 million? What's the number?
The number that's being reported is roughly 8.5, 8.8 million. Some are saying it's 15 million.
Let's just do basic economics here. What are the two principles of economics? Supply and demand. Is there more supply in America now? Meaning humans? There's apparently 8 to 10 million more. Now, these people we just established, even if it's 5 million, whatever it is, there's more people in America since this open border ridiculous Biden policy. Cool, follow me now. Those people, we've just established that maybe 1% of them, if that, are showing up with hundreds of thousands of dollars. Those people are buying businesses. There's a protocol for that. But 99% of them are basically have no money, have no wages, and they need to work, and they're getting stimmy checks or handouts or debit cards. They need places to live, free apartments, free hotels, knocking on people's doors. Yo, I'm taking over now. How many times have we highlighted the squatting situation in New York? So it's affecting the poorer people. Socioeconomically, they're losing jobs to these people. They're losing money to these people. They're losing opportunities to these people. That's why, Chicago's going red now. We can't take this anymore. They're prioritizing immigrants over citizens. They're taking jobs and opportunities and housing in this specific case from the disadvantaged, disenfranchised.